next section of our human design studies, and we're talking about understanding the human design centers. The centers throughout the body are the key components that shape our energy and behavior. In this presentation, we're going to explore all 9 centers, their functions, and how they influence our daily lives and interactions, and what the difference is between defined and undefined centers. So let's get into it. The 9 centers, quick overview here. First center is the head center, inspiration and mental pressure. That's what's going to be happening in this space. Next is ajna center, conceptualization and mental processing, followed by the throat center, communication and manifestation. Then the G center is our identity, direction, and love. Heart center, or the ego center, governs our willpower, ego, and the material world desires. Next, we've got back real quick. The last 4 here, the 9 centers overview, finish that up. Sacral center controls life force, energy, work, and sexuality. Solar plexus manages emotions, desires, and sensitivity. Spleen center is responsible for intuition, survival, and well-being. And finally, the root center deals with stress, drive, and adrenaline. So you're going to see these centers reflect very closely the locations of the chakras from Hindu philosophy, and some of them are chakra centers that have been combined into one. So what we're going to talk about here is the difference between defined and undefined centers. So we're going to go through these centers each individually. A defined center is going to show up on your chart as colored in, while an undefined center is going to show up as white. And a good way to think about the difference between defined and undefined centers is going to be, a defined center is kind of like if you plug your lamp right into an outlet. It has a power source attached to it, so it has consistent energy flowing through it. An undefined center is going to be a variable energy to it. So energy flows in and out of here freely because it's influenced by the environment and people that are around you and things along those lines. So it's going to be like when you charge your phone and then you unplug it and you take it and the battery can drain and maybe you throw it on the charger again and it recharges and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a good way of thinking about it. Okay, so let's talk about the head center. Let me scooch this little guy out of the way so I'm not blocking you guys. The head center, inspiration and mental pressure, as we mentioned before. So defined head center is going to have consistent mental inspiration and pressure to think and ask questions. A defined example is going to be they consistently are generating new ideas and thoughts, and they're just coming up with all sorts of stuff all the time, and that's kind of the regular occurrence for somebody with a defined head center. An undefined head center is going to be open to external mental pressure and inspiration from the environment or the people that surround them. So an example of that is going to be picking up on others' questions and ideas, potentially feeling overwhelmed sometimes by mental pressure, but they're going to have a little bit more flow and flexibility and feed off of other people and their inspiration. Okay, so the ajna center. That's conceptualization and mental processing. This is where everything kind of is coming together and you're creating your personal philosophy around it. So a defined ajna center is a consistent way of thinking, processing, and conceptualizing or understanding information. They have strong opinions and fixed in their ways of understanding. So they really have one learning or one comprehension style, and that's about it. That's going to be the best fit for them. An undefined ajna center is going to be a little bit more flexible in their thinking. So they're going to be open to various perspectives and ways of processing information, a little bit more open-minded, adaptable in their thinking styles and understanding different points of view. They can kind of step into somebody else's shoes and understand that. That doesn't mean that they don't have clear opinions on things. It's just that they're able to see someone else's point of view, even if they don't necessarily agree with it. All right, so the throat center, communication and manifestation. A defined throat center is going to have a consistent, reliable way of communicating and manifesting ideas. So they're really not going to, when they talk to you, when they express ideas, when they're speaking something into existence, they're not going to throw you for a loop. They're going to show up, they're going to express it the same way every single time you encounter them. An undefined throat center is going to have a variable style of communication, and they're influenced by the people around them. So for instance, you could throw them in the middle of nowhere and they could meet a goat farmer and they could make a conversation out of thin air like that. I can say that because I have an undefined throat center, and I can pretty much make conversation about anyone or about anything with anyone. And so that's the best way to kind of think of that. They're able to find common ground, explain, communicate in a lot of different ways so they can reach a lot of different people. So an example of a defined center is going to be they have a clear and steady way of expressing their thoughts and ideas. And like I said, undefined have like a very adaptable way of speaking and communicating. All right. So next is the G center for identity, direction, and love. A defined G center is going to have a strong sense of self, direction, and consistency in expressing love. So when they're expressing to you their love or their feelings or their emotion, they are always going to be very clear and express it in the same way. So let's say somebody's love language is acts of service. That person is always going to be expressing their love through acts of service. Words of affirmation, same thing. An undefined G center is going to have a flexible sense of identity, and they're going to be influenced by their environment and people around them. That's not to say that they're, weird or shady in any way and they're constantly like changing their personality. But what it is to say is that around certain groups of people, they're showing up in a specific way, and then they can switch that as they're around a different group of people or in a different environment. For example, they may show up one way when they're at work and then another way when they're at home with their family. So the impact that this has for us is it influences the sense of purpose, our relationships, and the overall direction of life, how we're identifying and expressing love. All right. The heart center, willpower, ego, and material world. So a defined heart center is going to have consistent drive, willpower, and connection to the material world. They have strong willpower and determination. Nothing's going to stop them. Nothing's getting in their way. An undefined heart center is going to have variable willpower and ego. It's influenced by external factors, and they may feel a pressure to prove themselves. So since they don't have that consistent drive coming in, they don't have that consistent energy flow towards drive and willpower, sometimes they may feel like they're falling short in certain areas. And so they're going to feel like they have to prove their worth in that area. It's going to influence how one approaches challenges and material pursuits. So they might have like blinders on and go for it if they have a defined heart center. An undefined heart center may fluctuate. The plan might change. You might have to take different approaches, that sort of thing. Not that they can't accomplish things, but it's just going to be done in a different manner. All right. So the sacral center is a life force and reproductive energy. So here's how this is showing up. In a defined sacral center, which all generators and manifesting generators have a defined sacral center. So as we talked about in the past, in a defined sacral center, the energy is consistent. So that aligns right with the idea of a generator. They have consistent energy constantly flowing through them. They're not reliant on outside sources to provide that. An undefined sacral is going to have variable levels. So they may go through ebbs and flows of energy throughout the day or throughout a lunar cycle. Productivity-wise, a defined center is going to be steady and reliable. They are going to get the job done, consistency over time, right? They'll get the job done for you. An undefined sacral is going to be a bit inconsistent with things. They'll most likely still get the job done for you, but it's going to be a lot of work for a little bit, and then nothing, and then a lot of work again, and then they need to rest and recover. So they're going to have this up-down energy to how they get things done. And a defined sacral center is going to influence this by they are able to be self-sustaining. They don't, unlike an undefined sacral center, they don't need an external influence in order to maintain their energy flow and their productivity. All right. The solar plexus center is about our emotions and the emotional awareness. So an undefined solar plexus is going to have consistent emotional waves, awareness, and expression. They have regular highs and lows. They're not going to be all over the map. They're not going to be up, down, and all around and throwing you for a loop. You can expect the natural expression of emotion given the situation. For instance, if something really exciting happens, you can expect them to be excited and energized by it. If something sad happens, then you can expect sadness, possibly depression, to be occurring. But they're going to ebb and flow based on what's going on and the appropriate responses. An undefined solar plexus is going to have emotional variability. They're influenced by others' emotions, and they amplify and absorb those emotions from others. Meaning, let's say you call them up, you have a best friend who has an undefined solar plexus, you call them up and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, I just got a promotion at my job. They are going to be your biggest cheerleader. They're going to get right on board. They're going to say, let's go out, we should have dinner to celebrate. They're going to be really excited along with you because you're expressing excitement about something. And the opposite, someone with an undefined solar plexus could walk into a room, and if the vibe or the energy is off, or it feels tense, or somebody in there is like fighting, they immediately know they're going to absorb it and possibly amplify that awkward, the vibe is off kind of feeling. Okay. The spleen center is about survival, health, and intuition. So for a defined spleen center, what we can expect is consistent, intuitive insights and awareness of health and safety. An example is going to be they're going to have a reliable, immediate, intuitive response. They immediately know something's off, know something's wrong, know that there's danger around that corner, right? That's how it's going to show up. An undefined spleen center is going to have variable intuition and be influenced by their surroundings. So an example of that is going to be they're unclear about, reading the energy around them, and they're going to be influenced by their environment. So they're going to look for cues around them to let them know, is it safe? Is this the right room to be in? Am I in the right place doing the right thing? That kind of thing. So they're going to read the room to figure out what's going on. All right, the root center, the last center, drive, stress, and adrenaline. A defined root center is going to have consistent drive and an ability to handle stress. They're stable and steady under pressure. This is the person that you want as your ER doctor. Nothing's going to faze them. They're just going to do exactly what needs to be done under pressure, no matter what. They can handle it. An undefined root center is a variable response to stress and drive, and they're influenced by external pressures, so they might feel overwhelmed by stress from others. So it's not even necessarily stress that they're personally experiencing, but they're going to take on the stress of other people and feel that for themselves as well. So that can be an interesting balancing act. Now it can be great because they can very much relate, have empathy and understanding for other people when they're under stress, and possibly brainstorm and find solutions, but at the same time, sometimes if there's a lot of input that's coming in, it can be very overwhelming for them. Okay, so defined and undefined centers, there's a key difference. Defined centers, like I mentioned before, are providing stability and consistency in those energies and behaviors. So I want you to take a look at your chart and see where you have defined centers, what those centers mean, what the impact and influence is on you, and kind of notice, like my behavior is very consistent with this defined center. I always consistently act this way. For instance, if you have a defined root center, you are consistently good under pressure, that kind of thing. You can start noticing what attributes in yourself and your own personality you can attribute to your defined and undefined centers. So the influence of defined center is going to shape your core traits and characteristics of the individual. People are going to know you as somebody who is good in the heat of the moment if you have a defined root center. Undefined centers are going to reflect and amplify the energy from the environment around them. So they have the adaptability and the variability and the flexibility of behavior on their side. So they are able to relate to someone else at a deeper level because they can feel those emotions flowing through them, but they don't have to necessarily embrace them as their own. So that's an interesting perspective. And so take a look at your chart where you have undefined centers and see how you're like, oh, I'm not necessarily attached. That's not a defining characteristic of my personality, but I have been in situations where other people have felt this way, and I've felt those emotions along with them, and I've worked through those emotions along with them. Or I've walked into a room where it's, awkward feeling, awkward vibes. I picked up on that. I knew that it wasn't necessarily me, but I knew that something was going on. Those sorts of things. Take note of that and journal it down for yourself. Okay, observing the center dynamics in daily life. So again, like I said, journaling. Track your daily experiences and interactions related to your defined and undefined centers and see where those things are showing up so you can recognize them. And practice awareness of how the different centers react in various situations. So that you have that mindfulness around it. And you can kind of have an understanding of, oh, typically I react this way because it's defined or undefined. It doesn't pigeonhole you necessarily, but it helps you kind of have perspective about things. And then reflect, identify patterns in the past and interactions related to your center dynamics. Applying this knowledge, let's identify your centers. If you haven't already, I highly suggest go in the link that we've provided, run your chart, run your spouse's chart or your children or your co-workers, anybody's chart, so you can see where your defined and undefined centers are and how they influence you, but also how they may influence the interactions that you have with others based on them. Next, observe the influences. Pay attention to how these centers are impacting your behaviors and your interactions with yourself and with others and the environments around you. Journal your insights. Keep a note of it maybe before bed each evening. Note down like, hey, I have this experience today. That makes sense. It correlates with this undefined center. Or this correlates with my defined center over here. And then reflect on patterns and kind of analyze that for yourself so you can start recognizing those behaviors, and you can even shift sometimes so that you can be more and more in alignment with your personal human design. All right, so that wraps up this lesson. I hope you found it really, really valuable, and I'm really excited to hear some of the insights that you guys have from this.